members of the public who are listening into this live stream broadcast from the Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs. We have before us Mr. Matan Karimli, Director of International Labour Organization in the Pacific, ably assisted by Elena Gerasimova. The subject is the optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child on the Involvement of Children in Armed Conflict. Fiji signed the Convention on the Rights of the Child, CRC, on 2nd July 1993 and ratified the CRC on the 13th of August 1993. The optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child on the Involvement of Children in Armed Conflict is an international instrument that states parties to the CRC may ratify. The optional protocol aims to protect children from recruitment and use in hostilities. It was adopted by the General Assembly on the 25th of May 2000 and entered into force on the 12th of February 2002. Mr. Karimli, before you is my Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and Defense. Honorable Dr. Salik Govind, Deputy Chair, Honorable Selai Andimaitonga, and Honorable Pio Tigundudur, and myself, Alex O'Connor, as the Chair. With that words of introduction, Mr. Karimli, a brief introduction of your good self and Ms. Elena, and the floor is yours, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, honorable members of the Committee on Foreign Affairs and Defense. I am pleased to join this meeting along with Yelena Gerasimova, International Labour Standards Specialist, to make submission on behalf of ILO. Honorable Chair, honorable members of the committee, as per ILO 2017 global estimates of child labor, 250 million children live in areas affected by armed conflict. Many of 168 million children engaged in child labor live in conflict and disaster affected areas. Tens of thousands of girls and boys find themselves fighting adult force in at least 17 countries in different regions around the world. During conflicts, children are recruited, particularly by armed groups, to be used not only as combatants, but also as spies, helpers, and porters, or become victims of sexual exploitation and abuse. Besides the dangers of combat, they often suffer physical and psychological abuse, harsh duties and punishments, and are frequently exposed to alcohol and drug consumption. This creates deep scars in children's minds, and reintegrating them once the conflict is over is often complicated. The use of children in armed conflict is a worst form of child labor, a violation of human rights, and a war crime. Child labor in conflicts and disasters violates international law, Security Council resolutions, and UN conventions, including ILO Convention 138 on minimum age of admission to employment, ILO Convention number 182 on the worst forms of child labor, ILO Recommendation number 71 on employment organization in the transition from war to peace, as well as the Convention on the Rights of Child and Security Council Resolution 1612 on children and armed conflict. ILO Convention 182 on the worst forms of child labor defines forced or compulsory recruitment of children for use in armed conflict as a worst form of child labor. Convention number 182 is one of the ILO Fundamental Convention, covering subjects that are considered to be fundamental principles and rights at work. Addressing this violation of fundamental rights has been a concern and obligation for the ILO ever since the coming into force of the worst forms of child labor convention number 182 in 2000. Fiji has ratified ILO Convention number 182 in 2002. In accordance with the ILO Worst Forms of Child Labor Recommendation 190, members should provide that the following forms of child labor: all forms of slavery or practices similar to slavery, such as the sale and trafficking of children, debt bondage and serfdom, and forced or compulsory labor, including forced or compulsory recruitment of children for use in armed conflict, are criminal offenses. The Convention on the Rights of Child contains several provisions on child labor, including addressing protection of children in armed conflicts. It was reinforced in 2000 by the adoption of 2 optional protocols, one on the sale of children, child prostitution and child pornography, and the other on the involvement of children in armed conflict. The optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of Child on the involvement of children in armed conflict prohibits of recruitment, voluntary or compulsory, of children under 18 by armed forces and groups. Armed conflict is one of the major challenges to meeting the target of eliminating all worst forms of child labor. Children must be protected from harm at all times, including they have the right to be protected during conflicts and disasters, and the best interest of the child have to be upheld. They have the right to regain their normal life and return to learning as quickly as possible. Education is key in combating child labor and for the development of prosperous societies. It's wrong for children to have to work to ensure their own survival and that of their families. Eradicating of child labor, including its worst forms, is a global and global agreed priority. Target 8.7 of the Sustainable Development Goals calls for states to take immediate action and effective measures to eradicate forced labor, end modern slavery and human trafficking by 2030, and secure the prohibition and elimination of the worst forms of child labor, including recruitment and use of child soldiers, and by 2025, end child labor in all its forms. These targets can only be achieved if no child is left behind in the fight against child labor, and especially worst forms of child labor. In 2018, Fiji signed up to the Global Alliance 8.7 as a pathfinder country, committing to accelerating efforts to achieve the SDG target 8.7 and sharing the lessons and knowledge generated among the other 21 pathfinder countries. As Alliance 8.7 pathfinder country, Fiji has committed to accelerated action, implement innovative solutions, and to share knowledge about best practices and lessons learned. ILO welcomes that the Parliament of Fiji considers the ratification of treaty on the optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child on the involvement of children in the armed conflict, and the task the Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and Defense to examine this treaty and supports the recommendation to ratify the optional protocol. Honorable Chair, this concludes my submission. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Karimli. Does Ms. have any words for us? I have a question, sir. You mentioned that the Convention on the Rights of the Child, 1612 on children, is still being formulated. Is there? You have any idea when this should be released to the states parties?
Which convention? Sorry, could you?
You mentioned under revision.
Well, it means
Unemployment Organization in the Transition War.
Well, this means that currently ILO is revising this recommendation, and in a few years it may come with a new edition of this recommendation. But currently, the current edition is in force and fully implemented. Yeah, but member states of the ILO are considering the new edition of this document.
Thanks, ma'am. Honourable members, you have any questions? Honourable Dr. Salik Govind? Yeah.
Could you please unmute your mic?
Sorry, I'm sorry. I want to thank the presenter for his comprehensive presentation this morning. And my question is, what sort of challenges Pacific Island countries are facing in overall eliminating child labor? What are some of the challenges they are facing? And are there variations in countries in terms of child labor in general?
Honorable Chair, through you, I want to thank the honorable member of the committee for the question, and I will ask my colleague Irina Gerasimova to answer this question.
Thank you very much for this question, Honorable Chair, and through you, I thank the honorable member of the committee for the question. Well, you are right. There are very different challenges in various countries to eliminate child labor. Well, the main challenge, we would say, is the lack of economic power and economic wealth of countries, which would be able to provide proper educational systems and would be able to provide decent employment for parents of kids, of children, allowing children fully concentrate on education and at the same time allowing their parents feed their families and their children, and not only feed, but provide an opportunity for decent development and future development. But in some particular cases, as soon as we are discussing right now, very special case, very special form of worst forms of child labor, particularly we are speaking about participation of children under 18 in armed conflicts. With this, of course, there are much more other reasons and problems, and of course, lack of political stability and economic stability also are part of that, but also political contradictions and internal and interstate disagreements and problems. That is all involving children into these forms of child labor. But for the ILO, what we want to emphasize, as Mr. Karimli said, use of children in armed conflicts, it's a human rights violation, it's a war crime, but for the ILO, and that's why many different organizations, international organizations and national agencies work with this problem. But for the ILO, we see it as one of the worst forms of child labor. And together with all ILO member states, we are committed to do everything possible to eliminate this form of this one of worst forms of child labor as use of children in armed conflicts.
Thank you. Thank you.
Honourable Pio, your question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Through you, I thank our presenters this morning for a brief but comprehensive presentation on the optional protocol that is before us. My question to them is, the UN agencies that have presented earlier to the committee made a specific mention of provisions within the RFMF Act, the Republic of Fiji Military Forces Act, that gives discretionary powers to the commander of the RFMF to recruit persons between the ages of 16 and 18. Now, into the force is required the other UN agencies have strongly recommended that Fiji review this provision because it does allow for the recruitment of children below the age of 18. And I know that power is discretionary. So in terms of ILO, what is the ILO's position on this? Do you share the same views as the other UN agencies? We just had UNICEF. We've had United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights and all that. So yes, that's. I'm just interested to know that. Thank you.
Honorable Chair, I want to thank Honorable Member of the Committee for the question. I will ask my colleague Elena Gerasimova to address the specific of this question. But before, usually the question asks whether these all forms of work done by children are classified as a child labor and therefore prohibited. As we see, there are more than 152 million children in labor across the world. But when we look at the overall number, the number of children in the labor is bigger than that. It's more than 218 million. The difference of the 66 million is because not all children engaged in work are considered to be child labor and forced labor. This includes children from 12 to 14 years old, boys and girls who are working non-hazardous light work and less than 14 hours a week. It's not a child labor. I mean, it's not a forced labor. And the children from 15 to 17 years old working in non-hazardous work is not considered forced child labor. But all working children below 12 are considered to be child labor. As to the military service, I will ask my colleague Elena Gerasimova to answer this question.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, and through you, I thank the Honorable Member of the Committee for the question. For this question, to answer this question, we can use the ILO Convention 138, which was also ratified by Fiji. This is Convention on Minimum Age for Admission to Employment. So in accordance with this convention, the minimum age for children when they can start working is either 15 years or the age when they complete their obligatory education. There are some exclusions from this general rule, which were mentioned already by Mr. Karimli, but I want to focus only on exclusions which are required to rise the minimum age for employment. So the minimum age for employment should be higher, above 15, in cases when children work in hazardous works, and there are hazardous works. So countries should adopt special lists of hazardous works. And the second, and actually this list of hazardous works exists in Fiji. And we are currently, Fiji as an Alliance 8.7 country last year convened a workshop to develop a roadmap to see how to deal with various aspects of Alliance 8.7 agenda. And part of this agenda, part of this roadmap was to review the list of hazardous works in Fiji and to consider whether it should be updated. But de facto, it exists right now. So these hazardous works are, children should not be employed unless they are 18. But also there are these specific worst forms of child labor, which should be eliminated always in all countries. And they include use of children in armed conflicts. So for these cases, it also should be not earlier for armed conflicts, but for participation in military service or armed conflicts. The recruitment should not start earlier than children, people achieve 18 years old. So as we know, ILO supervisory bodies, committee of experts, never made any comments or suggestions regarding the minimum age of employment to Fiji. So as much as we know, the legislation in Fiji regarding minimum age of accessing employment is fully in compliance with Convention 138 and 182. And based on that, we consider that Fiji may ratify this optional protocol. We do not have any concerns on that. But at the same time, as I mentioned, we do have a plan developed by Fijian national state agencies together with civil society organizations and UN organizations last year during Alliance 8.7 workshop, which considers that the list of hazardous works should be reviewed and analyzed from the point of view whether any changes or updates are needed. But there are no obvious contradictions with their conventions, with the ILO conventions 138 and 182. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Silai, your question, please.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Through you to the submittees, I would like to thank you for your comprehensive statement this morning. The question is on target 8.7 of the Sustainable Development Goals, calls for states to take immediate action on effective measures to eradicate forced labor and modern slavery, human trafficking on 2030. My question is this: are we really sure right now that we can eliminate worst forms of child labor, including recruitment and use of child soldiers? And by 2025, what if stated that there should be child labor in all its forms? There shouldn't be. There'll be. You people are trying to eradicate that. But the thing is, what I'm worried about, I'm talking about the sugarcane farmers. I believe some of the children under the age, they are doing hazardous work like cane cutting. But if that can be looked into, that is my plea, because I believe right now we are trying to rectify this. But then in other areas, like in farming, because I'm from the farming area, and I believe that this should be looked into because of the farmers. Some of them are using underage children to cut canes. Thank you, members and chair, and this committee.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, and through you, I want to thank the honorable members of the committee. The conventions and the recommendations they're very clear on the age of children to be engaged in child labor. So as I mentioned earlier, there are certain conditions for children starting from 12 to 17 to be engaged in different fields. And for the children aged 12 to 14, they can actually work in non-hazardous work, but less than 14 hours a week. And as you rightly mentioned, the most of children in the child labor, they're concentrated in the agricultural sector, which accounts about 71% of children. As to the target to eliminate the child labor by 2025, this actually is the political will and determination of all countries across the world to come together and to eliminate the child labor. If we look back for the last decade, the child labor has been, thanks to the common joint efforts of the global community, has been decreased by 100 million. So this demonstrates that coming together and putting the necessary resources together and demonstrating the political will actually lead to the decrease of child labor. And as to the Alliance 8.7 activities in Fiji, I will ask my colleague Irena Gerasimova, who is in charge of the relevant projects, to answer this question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, and through you, honorable members of the committee. Yes, you are quite correct. Well, agriculture is definitely the sphere where the majority of children do work all over the world. And I think this is also the situation in Fiji. And especially, we all understand that the situation became worse now during the COVID-19 pandemic because schools were closed and many families, many adults lost their employment and their incomes. So the situation has really changed to worse for many families. Many families had to return back to their villages, for example, from cities, etc. And like they are returning much more than earlier to this style of life around their farms, around their land, and children are involved more than earlier in this type of activities in agriculture, even if earlier they were not. Yeah, so like right now we are facing probably even more challenges than we had before COVID-19 pandemic, and it's threatening challenge for all the people in the world who deal with this problem is that the situation with child labor, with number of children in child labor may become much worse now after COVID-19. Well, we can say probably that it is already worse now than it was before COVID-19 pandemic, and that now to achieve our goals established by SDG 8, particularly target 8.7, it will be much more complicated, of course. But what can be done now? I mentioned already that last year in 2018, we had here a national workshop on achievement of SDG 8.7, target 8.7 in Fiji, because Fiji committed to become 8.7 Pathfinder country, and we have developed a roadmap. So as part of this roadmap, we have started a project in Fiji to help to make next steps to eliminate worst forms of child labor and just to improve the situation with the use of child labor in Fiji in general. So we are starting this project right now together with the Ministry of Employment and with social partners, with FTUC and FSEF, workers and employers organizations. And we hope that all tripartite partners will be strongly involved in this project. What I also want to mention, and this is probably important for you as the members of the parliament to consider, in all countries, we understand that there is a direct link between children in education and children at work. Yeah, then more children go to schools and less they work. So it is really important to provide an opportunity to receive free education for all children from all families, no matter what is the level of income of their parents and their families. So what ILO recommends specifically right now during COVID-19 pandemic, because many families lost their incomes and parents lost their salaries, their employment, they struggle a lot in many countries to provide an opportunity for their kids to attend the school. And it is not only the problem of free or paid education, it is also a problem to provide very simple things for which usually parents could pay, but now they cannot pay. I mean, free lunches at school, free uniform, free transport to get transportation to get to school, and an opportunity to receive free books. As I understand, not all of these options exist in Fiji, and this may really create problems for many Fijian children to return back to school when schools are reopened. So probably you can think about opportunities to provide some of these options that will really help to return back to schools more children in a situation where their parents lost their employment and their incomes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Karimli and Ms. Gerasimova, for acceding to our request. Time is pressing, and we thank you once again for acceding to our request to join us this morning. If we do have any other pressing questions, I hope you will oblige, and we will email these to your good selves. With those words, thank you. And if you have any parting words, sir, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Honorable Chair, honorable members of the committee, we are very grateful for this opportunity to make this submission, and we look forward to future opportunities to cooperate with the members of the Parliament, in particular with your committee. Thank you very much. Helena.
Well, thank you very much. It's a great initiative. We fully support the decision to consider ratification of this optional protocol. And from the ILO, we are here to support you, the whole country, Fiji, to improve the situation in the world of work, including to improve the situation with child labor. So thank you very much.
Thank you again. And you both have a blessed day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.